Hi, everybody. So I'm really excited to build off the work you've been doing with Megan to think about ways you can really foster close looking and evidence-based reasoning as you investigate different works of art. So we're going to think about strategies for really building on that part that you started with, but also integrating other information sources. Okay, so this is my Oprah moment. Under your chart paper, you will find a stack of resources for this activity. So this time, instead of me as the facilitator being the holder of information, each person in the group is going to get a different piece of information. So take a moment to just distribute that one per person. Give me a thumbs up when you've distributed. There should be, I think, enough for, there's 6 at each table. So if you have more, you could double up, partner up for one group. And if you have a small table, you're going to do double duty, right? You're going to take 2 if you have 3 people. So thumbs up when you've gotten everything distributed. All right, I see you at the back. You're ready. Okay, so right now, everybody has a different piece of information. And what you will find is that each has a unique strength in terms of what it's conveying, and it also has some limitations. So I want you to start by independently looking closely only at the resource you have in your hand and jotting down notes about what you learn from just looking at that resource. So that's going to be step 1. Take about 2-3 minutes to look closely at whichever resource you selected and jot down some notes. So as you're ready, you can move on to step 2, which is introducing yourself, if you haven't already, to one person at your table. So just focus on a partner group for now. Unless you're a group of 3, feel free to all work together. And you are going to share a bit about the piece of information that you investigated, and you're going to explore any connections between the 2 pieces of information you investigated. Great. Wonderful. So let's start. It was a little bit like a puzzle, like a game of Clue. How do these things fit together? So I'm curious to hear about some of the interconnections you found between the different resource materials as you were chatting and your table groups. Feel free if you can raise your hand if you're ready to share. Oh, over here. Thank you.
We've got the Silk Road on this table. We've got 5 countries represented by people. And looking at these pictures, 2 of us have almost identical pictures. One is China on there, and the other one says Iran. And then someone here has a background that interprets that as the Silk Road.
Okay, so noting the 2 images, the 2 works of art that are featured, looking very similar, that just the basic kind of what Megan identified as tombstone information, giving you cues that they're actually from different places in the world, and then finding this other text-based source that talks about interconnections. Thanks for starting us off. Yes?
Yeah, this was a really fun activity. I'm super excited to use it in class. Right, so we all had different, did we all do the same thing in here?
Yes, each table has the same information
cool.
set.
Yeah, that was really fun because initially, I was just reading the text about the drinking vessel and everyone was doing their own thing. And then when we finally, had our talking moment, we realized, the map, includes the Silk Road, which is how, the Chinese would have been connected to the Persians, and here's a timeline that's indicating when the Persians were powerful and when these arts were being created. So yeah, that was fun. Thank you.
And what was fun about it for you?
That initially we didn't realize that, or maybe I went to the bathroom, so maybe I missed your directions, but I didn't really know what the connection was. I was just reading this, and then when you had us talk, and we initially didn't realize that the 2 art pieces were the same, but created by different empires. But then I read, I had the document that said that the Persians were basically creating a knockoff from the Chinese, and I think it was fun too because you had visual pieces to look at and discuss and do kind of, the last activity, observe,
right.
Make inferences, etc. And then the map work, timeline, text. So it was, utilizing different aspects of learning, I guess, to get at the same point. So that's why it was fun.
Great. So the different types of information that you can get information from an image or you can get information from a map, but it sounds like also the element of surprise of having, an aha moment.
I like the element too of it felt like a puzzle, like we were putting together a puzzle. These are different pieces that fit together, and I think that added a sense of like completion, like together we can make sense of it. If you're alone, you have like one viewpoint of it. So the puzzle part was neat.
Great. Thank you. Any other connections people made at their table as you were, yes, up at the front?
So I grabbed the timeline, and my notice on it is 3 points. The one is the longevity of those empires, and also the overlap. But one piece of puzzle is missing, which is a corresponding map. So it's the good aspect of this activity is really to, as your title said, is to connect, to create info from different sources. So the downside that we have to be cautioned of is just to make sure that there will be all the sources needed to have the picture complete.
Yes, so we hope to be helpful in that regard. All of these resources are on the Met's website, and we're going to, at the end of our presentation, we're going to do a walkthrough of how you can find various materials on the website, because I think half of it is just tracking down useful sources. So we're doing it today with these 2 works of art, but I hope it's a strategy that you could take and adapt and use in other contexts as well, just as a broader approach. Great, yeah.
One of the things we also have the privilege of being 4 people here from the same school, but we noticed across grade levels how to use this material in a way that's adaptive and responsive to the participants in the classroom. So something I wanted to share.
That's a good point. So differentiation, that you can really use the different approaches.
I was one of the people that had the piece of the art, the porcelain. And when the 2 that had the similar pieces, we were looking at it, I then started asking questions as to why the one I had was the one from China. And so like there's a bunny rabbit and it's pretty prominent in it. So like I want to know why. And so it's like I'm asking more questions by comparing to something that's similar, the knockoff per se, and then wanting to like go find more information about it.
That's great. It's always, if you can inspire curiosity and wanting to know more, I think that's always a success. And sometimes you even notice more just by comparing. I think you might look more closely than you would otherwise. I think we have someone at the front. Yeah.
Thank you. So what I liked about this activity, when I received the paper and I worked on my sheet, I know that my piece of information is important to the group. So everybody got something, and it was like a treasure hunt or something. Everybody has some has a map, some has other information. So instead of distributing all the information to everybody, but it makes it more curious and more like we want to find the truth. And then, and I think it's very appealing to students, this type of activity.
Thank you. So we're going to take the last 2 minutes, and we can answer your question. But the last 2 minutes, like Megan mentioned, to just think about how you might use or adapt this strategy or even some of these resources in your teaching, thinking about the specific age level you work with, subject area you support. But I'm going to come to you for your question. Yeah.
It was a question, just a comment.
Oh, okay, great. Go ahead.
I was just going to say how I think it's cool that to see the historical context of how different cultures influence each other in certain time periods. In terms of, in this one, Islamic civilization and China. At the same time period, you have the timelines, and then you have the pieces of art. I just think that's cool.
I think that's a great point. I was chatting with the person who heads up the curriculum in New York City for high school social studies, and they were saying while the curriculum, dives into these different parts of the world, what is often missed in the classroom is that they're not like they jump from one to the other, but don't talk about those interconnections. So that's a great point. All right, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes or so to do some brainstorming, thinking about how you might use or adapt the resources or strategy, and then we'll come back together for just a quick share out, followed by a break, which we owe you guys. Okay? All right, we will come back together to just hear a couple of ideas. So we'll take a moment to hear just a couple of ideas of how you might use or adapt this or make it even better in your classroom. And so I'd love to hear any of the strategies that came up at your table. Yes, front row.
I'm working on a project which is a virtual exchange, creating digital exhibits between students in Chicago and in Casablanca. So the kids are working, it's high school students, they're working in small exhibit teams of 4 to 6 people. And one of the things that we ran into last year is when they're researching their digital artifacts, everybody goes to the same place. Everybody goes to Wikipedia, right? It's easy. And we want them using online resources to do their research. And what would be interesting, what I like about this is you could write a rubric where each of the 4 or 5 exhibit team members has to look for a map, a timeline, a Wikipedia, whatever that is. But what's also interesting about it to me is we're trying to talk about, and I know all of you are too, who are teachers, how to evaluate what is a reliable source of information, especially online. And so this task of researching information online is particularly important for the larger lesson in this day and age of fake news, of evaluating is this a good source or isn't it, and how do you know it's a good source? Well, it's on the Met website, so they probably vetted it. But, and people look other places as well.
Two really great points, and I think that idea of as the facilitator or the teacher, you need not be the one that tracks down the resources, but you could think about criteria of having students look beyond just essays or just one type to look at multiple information sources. Great idea. Yes, in the back.
Public schools, I consider them to have the best school system in the world. And number one reason is because special ed doesn't exist outside of the United States. And number two is and it's coming out now in 4 top highest scoring high schools in the nation
are in Chicago. One of the big things that's helped us is Bill Gates came along, and we have the core curriculum in Chicago. And every high school uses it. And what that means is we're team players. Now, my background, I have a master's in biology, University of Michigan. Okay, we're team players. In science, you work as a team. Science is not a solo thing. It's a team effort. And we make up the curriculum in the high schools in Chicago as a team. And we also, which is unusual, most teachers are very isolated when they work. And this whole thing changed the whole system enormously. Just the concept of collaboration between all the teachers in the subject get together. At least once a week, they make a test up once or twice a week. And then the other partner in this is the kids. How are the kids doing on their testing? Do they have the right to be retested? The test has to change, but can they be retested, or are they stuck with a failure grade? So the whole idea of core curriculum, which we use in all the high schools in Chicago, has absolutely changed the whole scene.
That's great. It sounds like a really positive step forward, and the theme of collaboration I was also hearing as I chatted with people at my table before we started. So I'm glad to hear that's happening at many schools.
One more comment before we
take
a break. Yeah.
My background is in distance ed and online education, and even in my school, I was like always reaching out to my school leadership and so on, and teachers to say we could do virtual field trips. I said, we're only half hour from Chicago. We can go to the Art Institute online and show our students. So I encourage everyone in your schools to kind of reach out to those places, the Met, obviously, Library of Congress, our own amazing institutions, the Field Museum, Art Institute here, Science and Industry in Chicago, that they're looking to connect with schools and educators, and they're setting up programs to do this very thing. And one way that you can present it to your school leadership is the cost savings of connecting in that virtual way through online education, through online activities like this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we will take a 10-minute break. I have 10:40, so we'll reconvene here 10:50, and to get going for our part 2. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
So during this next segment, we'll have an opportunity to engage in one more approach, and then we'll close with an introduction and kind of web tour to some of the places where you can find many of the resources that we're using today and many others that we just couldn't pack it all in, to ensure that you leave today with some strategies you can use or adapt in your practice, as well as concrete resources you could go to as you develop materials for use in your classroom or online. So the theme of this upcoming activity is really recognizing and celebrating diversity and thinking about the importance of that now, as well as the importance of that in the past. And so we are going to use an investigation of Ottoman art as a catalyst for that exploration. So as you can see on the map here, the Ottoman Empire at its zenith in the late 1600s really covered the expanse of many different continents, many geographic, kind of various topographical features, peoples of different religious backgrounds, and even speaking a broad range of languages. And we're going to think about ways, the strategies they use to really unify this diverse community, leveraging the arts. So the arts play a key role. So what I'm going to do is we're going to share several slides that feature art of the Ottoman Empire. And as I'm going to give you a minute or so to look closely at each slide and just capture one detail you notice. And then we're going to check in about what's trending in Ottoman art. So I'm going to give you 1 minute for each kind of slide pairing and just capture one detail, any detail you find interesting. You can use the back of your agenda, just any paper you have on your table. So as you finalize capturing that last detail, I want you to look at the different sketches you made or the notes you made and think about what are trends? What are things that came up from one detail, from one work of art to the next? What are some themes you see here? Symmetry. Okay, great. What else? Yes. Okay, great. 2 points, and I'll repeat it just in case folks in the back couldn't hear. She's saying she's noticing kind of a color palette, the repetition of certain colors coming up over and over, and also the sense of movement, these organic lines that create a sense of movement. What else? Yes. That's a great point. He's noting just the consistency of blue throughout. You actually have the earlier works are really largely blue or even blue and white, mirroring the kind of influences from China and going back to kind of that first activity we had, but over time incorporating more colors. Yeah, great observation. What else? Really interesting. So a couple of ideas there. One is noticing kind of the use of repetition within the works, and then also thinking about kind of shapes that are contained, like you have this center pattern that kind of goes up to the edge and stops and then has another band. And then in other works where like this example of a tile, ways the shapes would continue and repeat kind of infinitely for as many tiles as you had as you put those together. So, yes. Right. It would actually complete the shapes on the edges once they were, put together. So it's really clever, right? The leader is recognizing there's this diverse group of people, and how are we going to visually signal that we are one, and really leveraging the arts to create a sense of unity and continuity. And not only that, really not going in and completely supplanting what was happening in many of those cultures, but actually taking components of various communities and integrating those. So here you have a comparison of a work of Byzantine art that's close to me with one of the works we already saw of Ottoman art. So what connections do you see there? What are some ways that they're drawing from art of Byzantine art? Okay, we see patterns for sure. Yeah, very similar in terms of color choices. Anything else?
Almost like a nature theme, so lots of leaves, flower kind of designs.
Definitely, yeah. So not so far from what was there, and the Ottoman court actually they had a scriptorium where all of these designs kind of were centralized, but they brought in that kind of central court artists from across all of the different lands, so they were integrating those components. So here is Mamluk art, an example, and this is, the Mamluks, they were in Egypt, they also spread out to other parts of the Arab world. What connections do you notice here between the two works of art? Yeah, again, the natural world. And I'll give one more example. So here, thinking about the Persian influences. What connections do we see here? So one noticing kind of, there's this continuation of art from the natural world, and then you also see here a depiction of a phoenix. And so thinking about the translation of those motifs, some of them coming from China, and then being translated and getting new meanings and symbolism within this context. So I'm going to share next an example of a work of art. This is a Torah. It is the official emblem or seal of a leader or sultan, and this one in particular is Sultan Suleiman II, or also known kind of in Europe as Suleiman the Magnificent. And it's actually, it integrates many of the features we were noticing before, so that kind of organic imagery and other components. But what kind of signals visually that this is fit for a king or fit for a ruler? How are they visually expressing that? So this sense of kind of the scale and expansiveness. Great. And then let's go to the very back, and then we'll come to the middle. Yes. Yeah, even just our choice of materials can have meaning and symbolism. And let's go to the middle. Yes, so this is actually script. It's actually the name of the leader, his various titles, and some of the accomplishments. And I'm going to go here to share. Let's see if we can get it to play. All right, I will skip it. But what we do have a feature which we can show you where to find those later, but that actually breaks down kind of the different components of the leader's name. So it highlights the text and showing kind of how it is creating that. And this was something that was used on the top of official documents. So if you think about a leader, they can't be everywhere, but they need to convey that they're authenticating something or that this is official. So this was originally on the top of an official document that would be distributed, and you would always know whether it was real or not based on this complex kind of signature or emblem that signaled the leader. What are some ways we accomplish that same kind of function today of kind of authenticating something, showing it is real? What are some strategies we use in our daily life for that? Yes, like we can think about, and what example came to mind when you thought of holograms?
Credit cards.
Yes, we've changed the way for credit cards. A lot of us have this chip now, so it's getting more sophisticated in terms of authenticating that's our card. Yes, what else?
Thinking about signature. So you can see, it is my signature or not, or it has a personality also. In the signature has the personality.
Oh, like analyzing handwriting or going to a notary to be like, that was really the person that signed it. Great. I've got someone over here.
Here, and then we'll go there.
I was thinking about PIN numbers and passwords to authenticate that it's you. Could be for taxes or for online accounts.
Yes, 21st century problems of remembering all our different passwords, and that we need to change our passwords, and the number of character counts and criteria. Definitely. So codes, passwords. We've got another example. Yeah.
Logos and trademarks.
Yes, like if you're a company and you have your brand on something, it's like the real thing versus like a knockoff.
I was thinking about on money. If we look at the back of any of our dollar bills, or whatever denomination, there's always some kind of description on the back. And now with the 50s and 100s, we even have, as the gentleman said earlier, a holographic picture of the presidents within the bill.
Yeah, we are doing this in so many ways today, and we certainly found some great examples from the group. So I really want to build on this. I thought this was so clever of a leader, of like pose with that challenge. How do you unify and lead, this really diverse in every way group of people, and how do you both recognize and value that diversity in your actions? So going back to kind of some of these examples of drawing upon the diversity within the community as sources of inspiration for a more unified kind of visual language, we're going to think about the diversity here in Chicago and the diversity in the various communities in which you live. So you have on your table some materials that we passed out. There's there's tan paper that's clipped. So take a moment to pass out one sheet of the tan paper to everybody and one sheet of the smaller pieces in the baggie, the small white paper square and then the carbon paper square. So we'll give everybody just a moment to distribute supplies. All right, so here's what we're going to do with them. You are going to start with that small white rectangle. It's going to be the first thing you need. And each person is going to think about the neighborhood they live in, the community you live in, something you really love about it. An example is living in New York City. I love that I don't need to drive. I love that I can hop on the train. I love the transit system. So that might be an example. So maybe for me, I might draw inspiration from something that's part of the public transit system. Something I could, think about a turnstile. I could think about some of the amazing tile work that's on the subway platforms there as an inspiration. And so what I would do is actually use that little rectangle to make a sketch of some detail that kind of, for me, symbolize that. And you can either do it from your memory, or I see digital devices everywhere. Feel free to pull up an image as inspiration. So each person's going to think about something you really value in your community, and you're going to sketch a small detail. You notice it's tiny, like smaller than a business card. You're going to sketch a small detail on that piece of paper, and then we're going to pause. So we're going to take about 5 minutes for that part, okay? Does everyone got that? On the small white paper. Yep, just the tiny little white paper. You got it. All right, so if you're not already sharing, you should go ahead and work towards making that transition to just share in a sentence or so kind of what you picked as inspiration and why with the people at your table. All right, so I'm going to ask you to pause just for one moment. I was learning about some amazing things about Chicago as I walked around, and people really excited to share things they love about their community. But I want to be sure I share the next step. So we'll introduce it, and you'll have about 5 minutes to work on it, and we're going to leave the materials out, so if you are so inspired, you can continue during your lunch. But I want to be sure you know where this heads. So each person now has a little piece that kind of captures something about Chicago and their neighborhood that they really love. So we want to think about, just like the Ottomans, how do we integrate these things together? So you'll notice you have these little pieces of carbon paper and a larger piece of paper with a grid that actually matches the size. So it's almost like trading cards, right? So you can actually put those drawings on top of the carbon paper. The dark side goes facing towards the area you want to transfer. And then you just trace over that detail that your neighbors sketched, and you can use repetition to repeat those, and you can use a range of the examples at your table to mix and match as you see fit to create a unified kind of Chicago that both celebrates the diversity within the city, but also brings things together. So you'll have about 5 minutes to work. You have colored pencils if you want to use them after you made the transfer, and then we will pause just to be sure Megan has some time to talk about some of the ways you can go back and access the online resources, but you'll be able to continue this. We'll have the materials out for you over lunch if you get really inspired. All right, so you are, of course, welcome to keep working on your materials, and like I said, you'll have them over lunch. I think you've really got the hang of it here, and things are really starting to develop in an amazing way, but we want to be absolutely sure that we point out places where you can find resources on the Met's website so you can turnkey some of these strategies and approaches. So my colleague Megan is going to give you a quick web tour. And in your folders, you'll find actually most of the URLs for the web components of the website we're going to visit in your folder in a flyer called Resources at Your Fingertips. So no need to try and jot it all down.
Okay, you guys, hello again. As Claire mentioned, you guys can totally keep working. My feelings won't be hurt if you keep drawing. I definitely was still drawing. So you all have this sheet in your folders, as Claire mentioned. It's called Resources at Your Fingertips, and it's got all of the, it's got resources, as you can imagine, the resources that we recommend most highly to teachers that come to our programs, and just it's a helpful way to help you navigate through our website, because there's a lot of stuff, and it's not always the best organized. Don't tell anybody in our digital department that I said that. But I will start with the most basic, sort of first essential part of our website. So this is our homepage here. And if you'll notice, we have these sort of like tabs across the top. And the first one that I want to point out is art. So you could click on art. And the first thing that pops up is collection. So this will take you to where you can search our collection. So as you can see, we have over 450,000 records in our collection, in our database here that you can search. So what it pulls up for you first is just this page, and it will sort of have this list of random objects that goes down. I always think that's kind of a fun way to approach the collection, is just sort of see what it randomly pulls up for you and keep scrolling forever. But I definitely don't do that at work ever. But if you're really looking for something specific, we've got these sort of filters here, so you can filter results by things like the artist or the culture, the type of material the object's made from, if you know that, the geographic location. So if you click on these, it opens up and you can start to select those types of criteria. A really handy thing that you can do to filter is right here. This group here will show you only specific objects. So say you're coming to the museum, which we all hope you'll make a trip out to New York City if you haven't before, to come see the Met. This checkbox here will show you only artworks that are actually on display. So this way, hopefully, you're not disappointed if you're like, oh, I'm so excited to see this thing, and then it's like, haha, it's not actually on view. So this will show you only things that are currently on view on the website. Within this category, though, you'll notice some objects come up with this little sad no photo image. Some objects have a record on our website, but we haven't gotten around to taking a photo of it, or there's some issue with rights or something like that that's preventing it from having a photo just yet. So if you want to get rid of all of those, you can click on this next one down, Artworks with Image. So you'll see only objects in the Met's collection that have an online image that you can access. And then lastly, this is a new feature. This checkbox here will show you only objects that have an image on the website that's in the public domain. As teachers, you're always sort of protected in terms of your use of images, because you can always just say, I'm using it for educational purposes, and that is just sort of your, you are free to use whatever you want, usually. But this is a way to make sure that you can use images for sure. And what's great about this actually is these images you can use and put them on anything you want. So you can take this image and manipulate it however you want. You can put it on a t-shirt, you can put it on a mug, you can use it in an art project, and you don't have to worry that you're like infringing on copyright or anything like that. So that's this page. You also have a search bar up here, and you can use it just the same way you would with Google for the most part. And you can do a keyword search. And this will pull up objects related to your keyword search. So I did Washington crossing the Delaware, and there it is. So it pulls up just a little bit of information in the image, so you can click on it. And this will take you to deeper information about this work of art. So each object has its own page, just like this, where it's got the image. And in the case of this one, it's got this public domain tag on it, so you know that it's in the public domain. This is the download button, so you can actually download this in high resolution. And what's really cool about this is you can zoom in really close and start to see lots of little details. If you've got a smart board in your classroom or the capability to project up onto a screen, this can be really great. So you can also download and print it if you'd like. And then scrolling down, you also have additional images. So I think somebody brought it up earlier, like, oh great, we have this printout of this object. That's only so helpful, it's one view of it, right? But with some objects that are sculptures, they've got multiple sides to them. You might want to see multiple views of something. So this would be where you would go for seeing something from that's been photographed from different angles. In the cases of some objects, they've been x-rayed or radiographed, so you can actually see what's underneath or what's inside. And so this is where those types of images live too. So it's a helpful tab if you're curious. Scrolling down, this is, again, what we call the tombstone information. So this is things like the artist's name, the date, and then the material it's made out of. And then down here at the bottom, this is a really helpful number. This is the accession number. So this is a number, kind of like in a library, a book gets, a code. And this is a number you can use to search that object. If you forget everything else about it, if you've got that number written down, you can then really easily just type that in to the search at the beginning. Again, if you're going to the museum, it will show you exactly where the object is located, and this links to a spot on the map. And then scrolling down further, you get a little blurb. This is typically the same information that you'd see on the wall label if you were in the museum galleries. So it's just a quick overview. This tends to be no more than like a couple paragraphs. In the instance of some objects, you can even find the entry for the audio guide. So if you want to, this is, like in the case of this one, it's just usually a minute or two of someone talking about the work of art. Going further down, you have tabs that can show you what signatures or inscriptions are on this. This can get kind of fun if there's stuff written on the back that you might not know, you might not be able to see. The provenance, it can tell you where this object, who's owned this object and how it's changed hands over time. We have a link to the timeline of art history here. This is where you can access essays and a description about historical events that were happening at the time that this object was created. And then lastly, we also have links to publications that feature this work of art. So if you're needing to do, a deeper dive in terms of research, you can find where this object is located in certain publications. So that's sort of the basics of of our object pages. I'll also show you back again in our art tab up here. So we just did the collection. The timeline of art history is really helpful. Each object that you'll see here, you can I think almost all of them are located on the timeline of art history, or they have a link to it on their object page. And so again, this is a collection of essays about historical events that were happening at the time that a work of art was created. So these are essays written by our curatorial staff and educators about works of art. And this has a really fun feature that, again, just shows you, but it will pull up just like a laundry list of objects, just images that you can just keep scrolling forever. And we also have, next to the art tab, you'll find the learn tab. And I just want to pull up, back on the art tab, we have a section called online features. This is a really fun one for if you want to pull up a quick video about a work of art in your classroom. We have a couple different ones to choose from. This is a great one called The Artist Project. It's contemporary artists talking about a work of art that they've chosen within the Met's collection. So it's a kind of cool way to have someone else's perspective on a work of art who's maybe not necessarily someone who's a scholar in that type of work of art, but they're just interested in it as an artist. We also have a feature called Met Kids. For everybody who's an elementary teacher, this is a really great one. My favorite part of this one in particular is it has videos that you can access that have art projects that you could do in the classroom that relate to works of art in the Met's collection. It also has Q&A videos. These are really cute. They are questions that kids have asked about why things happen in a museum. How did this object get here? Is this in somebody's house? And what I think is so great is that I think a lot of adults have these questions too. So even if you're not an elementary school teacher, this could be something you check out because they're getting answers from Met staff. And they're pretty great. And they're really quick. They're no more than 5 minutes long or so. Yes, you can. And I think it has instructions in there for the address to send questions to. Yeah. We get those in my office. They're awesome. It is Kahindo Wiley, yeah. Okay, and then the last tab that I want to show you guys is the Learn tab. And in particular, I want to take you to the Educators page. And here you will find some educators working. And in particular, we've got some lesson plans that have been generated by New York City public school teachers, often in collaboration with our educators. But so they usually explore one object and they make suggestions for related objects that you might use. But they go in depth in terms of how would you get students engaged in close looking with this work of art? How would you get students to think critically about this work of art? And it includes, here's our friend from earlier. Includes some activities, some art activities that you might try out, but it actually also gives you some open-ended questions that you can use with students that you might find helpful if you're starting to plan your own lesson. Back up on the main page for educators, right below lesson plans, we also have curriculum resources. These are sort of comprehensive guides to specific collection areas, and you can access all of these in PDF. So each one of these is the cover of a book, basically, that's been converted into PDF form. These are a great way to get yourself familiar with a collection area before you dive into teaching a lesson. They have a list of objects that are recommended for engaging students, and this one at the top here is actually where we pulled a lot of the images from that second activity that Claire had you guys do with the maps and the two art objects. So if that one was one that really stuck with you, you might take a look through here for some of the objects that you could use with that one. It's the whole book sort of scanned into a PDF. And this one, Art of the Islamic World, is the most recent one. So it was developed more with being online in mind. But they're a really handy deep dive into a collection. Thanks. Any other last questions before you get to go eat lunch? No. And Claire and I will be around, and I've got my card. I think Claire also has hers. If you guys want to grab one of our business cards, please do. But we're happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Let's give Claire and Megan a round of applause.